Welcome to the ITSP Magazine Podcast Network, a modern, innovative multimedia platform broadcasting ideas and connecting minds. You are about to listen to the Cognition Podcast, a show that looks at humanity's role in the rapidly changing world of science and technology, with your hosts, Hutch and Len.
Welcome to another episode of the Cognition Podcast. Today we have a really exciting episode. We have a special guest, Winn, the author of the Metawar. So fascinating conversation to come. Can't wait to dive into some of the insights related to his background as well, which is fascinating itself, as well as the details around that book. But kind of in usual fashion and routine, we're going to first jump into a few news articles that we thought were interesting. We're going to talk about AI Jesus, who's now taking confessionals at a church in Switzerland. We're going to talk about a California-based company that is now rolling out air taxis and is on track to be deploying those in Abu Dhabi in 2025. And then we're also going to talk about a recent study where GPT-4 performed better than doctors at illness diagnosis. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into it. So the first story that we had was a California-based company is on track to deploy air taxis in Abu Dhabi in 2025. I'll throw this over to you guys for thoughts first. I know we had some pre-show banter on this, and
you want to take first swing at this one, Winn, as our guest?
I just started playing with drones recently because I got a grandkid and I figure, cool, gives me an excuse to spend some money. And the reliability of a drone technology is when you have millions and millions of units out there, they're small, granted, but the fundamental technology is there. Now we look at this and I understand that people could be somewhat disturbed with a pilotless environment, but the upside of it is that right as of today, it's not like The Fifth Element, where you go to New York City and you've got thousands and thousands of these things competing for horizontal and vertical space. It's going to be reasonably limited. Number two, Abu Dhabi, you also have escape desert crash stuff pretty darn close wherever you go. So from an experimental proof of concept, I think that's probably not a bad location to actually start getting people to gain some confidence in it.
Well, I mean, honestly, when you hit on the first point that I was going to make, California-based company testing in Abu Dhabi. There's a reason they're not testing in LA.
There's a reason that the FAA doesn't want drones going over 400 feet. There's a reason for various types of drone privacy laws, all these things. And California is doing the tech, and they found a place to be a reasonable guinea pig. So I go for it. I'm anxious to see the science.
I will not. Justin and I had this conversation quite a few episodes back when we were talking about autonomous driving vehicles. And I said it then, and I'll say it now. If I'm not going to get into a self-driving car that's only going on one plane, I am definitely not getting into a self-driving drone.
Well, from a traffic standpoint, again, I would argue that this is probably safer. You've got in this one, how many? 6, 8? I don't know how many props going.
quite a few, yeah.
It looks like 6.
I don't know what their fail-safe designs are. I mean, I'd certainly be interested just as a geek.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be the first person to get on it, but
I'll watch from a distance. When I'll be on the one, I'll be the one, with the light up, little flashlight things going land.
well,
So I think the big question here that I would ask myself, do I want Sully or do I want AI?
See, and at the end of the day, I'm still going to go with the human, because I mean, let me just throw one mild scenario here. And in this case, with this drone right here, I don't think you really have much of a chance of gliding, but how many times have we seen in current air traffic where they've lost all the power and the pilot's still able to glide that sucker for a while, sometimes even landing them successfully and not. If you're dealing with an AI, once the power's out, buckle up, and I don't care about the FAA regulations. I'm lighting up a cigarette because we're going down.
And Sully got in trouble for what he did anyway.
Yep, but he can still walk away from it.
But they made a movie about him, so.
Where they showed us him getting in trouble. Never mind.
Hey, he got his royalties. I'm sure he got some money out of that somewhere as a consultant.
I actually got to meet him at one of the events I was at in the last couple of years.
That's cool. Is he laid back as he seems?
I was in stuttering star mode.
Wow.
Yeah, he was.
Only thing I could do was kind of, dude.
Yeah, he was actually the keynote speaker at our Evolve conference this past year.
The only person,
fascinating guy.
The only person that I've ever been that way with was, oh God, the dude from Catch Me If You Can. Oh,
Leonardo DiCaprio.
No, not the guy the real guy that Leonardo,
Frank
the actual,
Abagnale.
Frank Abagnale. Yeah, I got to meet him at one of our conferences, and it was like the only time I've ever been able to walk up to somebody and be like, dude, you are one of my favorite criminals of all time. You know, really good dude, though.
Yeah, I've seen him, but I've never met him. But maybe, I don't know. Maybe I did.
You've met everybody, man.
I don't know.
So, yeah, moving on from self-driving anything.
Yeah, so our next thing that we saw in the news was that recent study finds that GPT-4 in a blind study did better than doctors at medical diagnosis based on the information they had about a given patient. And I think it was, if I recall correctly, it was well over 10% delta between the two as well on diagnostics.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
It doesn't me either. I think the first thing that's going to go when you talk about doctors, it's not going to be the brain surgery or anything like that. It's going to be large language models can handle a large amount of compressed information that's in them and can reflect upon that better than a human's ever going to be able to retain any of that. So I think
they are an LLM that is constantly updated with all of the new published stuff, and you've got a decent amount of content curation. Because you don't want to put all the bullshit studies in there. You want to have some reasonable basis for including information that is valuable. Because when it says here, recent study, that immediately tells me 1,000 questions I've got. Give me the details on how the study and what the thing and what are the differentials, all the statistical stuff behind it, which most people have no idea how to look at, and I'm not a real expert at it, but I know how to read some numbers and probability. What I find of the most value is this should be in every single doctor's office as a friend over here. Hey, Bob, what do you think? Yeah, maybe you're right. Can we chat about that a little? Because I view it as that way, where ultimately the doctor is still supposed to be the primary caregiver.
Right. Like a human in the loop control, but
see, I think this show sheds light on a bigger problem, at least here in the United States, and that is we don't have doctors, and we haven't had doctors in a long time. We've got drug dealers.
Because of the pharmaceutical influences of the pharmaceutical industry.
And to be honest, I haven't seen any real doctoring in quite a while, and even when it comes down to triage and what we're talking about here in terms of diagnosis, I actually have to wonder how much of that may be jaded by their own personal interests. So I like the idea of somebody that's, a more impartial bias.
Yeah, kind of connecting the two dots there, like it is fascinating to think that probably a lot of our medical data here in the United States is heavily biased by the interests of the pharmaceutical company, and if that's used for training data, it likely would bias the outcomes of models.
And that's where you look at the nature of the study, the way the study was done, and the amount of fake studies that have been going on. So a study these days, well, it was an academic study. I'm sorry. I know, Len, you read the book. You have to be exceedingly careful when you do a dive into curating and validating evidence. And just because an AI says something to me is That's just another voice at a cocktail party, as far as I'm concerned. Maybe a well-informed one with its own set of biases, but it's another opinion.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to look at it.
But at the same time, I agree with what Winn was saying. This is something that, if it's showing this type of promise now, this should be being looked at as an additional tool available to doctors. To the
GP, to the guy at the GP's office, and the AI, hi, little boy, hi, tell us both, robot head thing, assistant, AI connected to the cloud. Tell us what you're feeling.
Well, my tummy hurts.
This is going to happen. Absolutely. Because it's inexpensive and it's, I don't know, what's it going to cost the doctor's office? I'm going to make up a number, $1,000 a month. Do it. And then go buy some nice Japanese robots to make it pretty.
I can honestly see this taking over emergency room triage.
Never take over. You're ceding control.
Well, to the point of taking over that initial step with still humans behind it, but instead of going up and when you go to the emergency room, they're like, okay, why are you here? What's your insurance? All this. I can see all of that stuff and doing that initial why are you here into one of these things and allowing it to start evaluating what needs to be priority and what doesn't.
Well, the EMT should have that as well.
Yeah, exactly.
This is a ubiquitous cloud-based function that exists. And people probably, I'm going to guess, just guessing, the majority of people today are looking for reasons to justify not using it, largely because of ignorance and lack of the education and how to learn how to coexist with technology.
It would be interesting to know whether or not universities right now that are teaching medical practice are suggesting the use of this as at least a sounding board.
What they are suggesting, and it's coming along very nicely, is the tactile issue of using AI for operation surgery. It's not 100% there yet, but with the tactile gloves, as they get more granular, you'll be able to actually hold a virtual heart in your hand and operate on it. Again, that's all in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Crass plug.
Hey, I got to tell you, you've got 3 authors on here. We're watching and taking notes, man.
I think this is great. I just think it, again, the people's expectations of AI stuff is so skewed by so many people with their own vested interest. And I really hope that when people listen to me, I don't come across having a really, I don't have an agenda.
No, that's really the one thing about you.
I don't have a dog in the fight. I just care about this.
I disagree. When you do have an agenda, if I may be so bold as to say, but your agenda is just to get people to think and look at things and form your own opinion. Your agenda is to get people to wake up to what we're actually dealing with. And I think that's a hell of a good enough agenda. I can get behind that agenda.
Big Pharma is not my agenda, and I've been taking the same drugs for 40 years. So,
all right. Well, maybe you can ask AI Jesus to do something about that.
I should send this to you. I in one of the early versions, when we were developing the potential for some artwork for the book, and one of them was for spiritual guidance. And it used all of the leaders. So it wasn't, we included as many denominations as you could reasonably, and to treat it as this, that you can have a conversation with Jesus for guidance or Muhammad for guidance. And then, all right, let's put Jesus and Muhammad in the same room together. And let's this is going to come.
Yeah.
And it's going to potentially be extraordinarily illuminating if the LLMs remain as close to neutral and unbiased as possible. Because it'd be really interesting to hear Jesus and Muhammad have a conversation.
Yeah, so there was, when I was in San Francisco, they have something called the Misalignment Museum, which was like a small pop-up museum that had a bunch of different kind of AI projects, some early history stuff, but they They had a system that somebody had built that basically was trained entirely on the writings of Slavoj Žižek, who is a very prolific writer today and kind of critical thinker, and then all of the writings of Aristotle, and they had just that ongoing back and forth conversation. And that was the art, was basically just that never-ending loop of conversation between those two models.
Did they ever learn from each other?
So I don't think they were updating the models, so no, they don't. But
I was going to say, we haven't reached general AI yet.
I'm not even saying general AI. You can do it with generative AI. And
so I think they were maintaining. It was apparent they were maintaining the context of the history of the conversation, at least up to a certain point, just based on kind of the back and forth banter. But I don't think they had anything more sophisticated than that.
Okay, Hutch. New cyber cognition side project. We need to build something like this and just see what happens. And you're the AI guy.
Well, so what was particularly interesting for me on this one is that, I guess specifically the intersection of religion, when they put this in to do confessionals with people in this church in Switzerland, you had so the person that actually created it did it as kind of a commentary on artificial intelligence and kind of its limitations at the intersection of AI and spirituality. But then you had people going in and interacting with this thing and actually coming out saying that they had this spiritual experience and that they believed that they talked to some kind of divinity. So it really is interesting kind of to see the shift in perception just as we are getting to this more advanced level.
Switzerland is an odd country to do that in initially, because it is not the most religious country on earth.
Yeah,
which is probably one of the reasons they were able to get away with it.
A church can get away with pretty much anything it wants. I mean, I guess you could do this at St. Pat's in Manhattan, right? What's the law?
It's not so much the law, and I'm not a Catholic, and I'm not claiming to be, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but usually whenever if we're dealing in confessions, I'm going to assume Catholic. And doesn't most of that stuff have to run up through the Vatican? And you would think that something as big as this, they would have an opinion on.
I think a lot of religious communities would have contention with something like this, as far as just the
implication.
I'll send you that the spiritual guidance poster that we worked on.
Yeah, definitely would be interested.
Please. But to me, this is just taking it to a new level. We've seen the virtual girlfriends. We've seen the virtual, professors.
Now virtual Jesus.
Now we've got virtual Jesus.
But you've also got virtual mental health professionals.
Yep. And that's actually even more terrifying to me.
That takes me into an area of non-expertise, so only opinion. So therefore, I will not say anything.
Well, all I'm saying is I would, and maybe this is just me because I'm inherently a very private person at the end of the day. I mean, I may be Mr. Geek, but I'm surprised we haven't heard any of my chickens on the podcast tonight. I live on a farm in the middle of nowhere, and the idea of anything that goes into one of these models, there's a record of that. There's a voice recording potentially. There's voice to text. There's a log. There's a way to track every single thing,
except for one thing,
which is,
how do you track neutrality?
Ooh, I guess by the lack of chaos.
In whose opinion?
Oh, you may as well just
to clarify, are we talking about like sentimental neutrality or what if?
No, whenever you're dealing with AI, any sort of AI, an LLM, whether
how do you evaluate if it's not biased in a
algorithmic bias, programming bias, all of the biases that go into the crew that is building the thing, and then ultimately data bias. These biases all exist. What we do not know how to do yet, unless I'm terribly misinformed, how do we measure what is neutral?
I don't know if neutrality can exist in AI systems. So when I think back to kind of the analytics courses that we took, I mean, really the definition of the model weights in a neural network are considered the weights and biases. So to me, bias almost seems inherent to the way that machine learning works.
Thank you. Yes.
I would say immeasurable.
And unless you have an idea, how do you know that AI is giving you the right answer? Every time I ask AI, so, I mean, I'm going to say 50% of the time, nah, that's bullshit. And I know I see that. And so sometimes, okay, turn off the AI. I'll go back and Google search it myself and spend a half hour if I care.
Hey, Hutch, I think we may as well just move the slide. We've already gotten here.
Let's do it. Let's talk about. So, Winn, I was looking back at the congressional testimony that you did and kind of some of the documentation on that related to kind of your perspective of the cybersecurity problem before it even happened. Just to kick us off, I'd love to hear a little bit about kind of the background of how you got to be in front of Congress for that in the first place.
I don't remember.
You don't remember how you got there?
I mean, I've been asked that. How the hell did I get up there? And who invited me and why? And I honestly don't remember. At the time, I was spending a lot of time in Washington doing a project for Hughes Aircraft, believe it or not. I was architecting a thing. So I don't remember, but it was some staffer, and
how does the world that we're seeing now compare to kind of your vision at that time, if you put yourself in your mental space?
Well, before you go there, if anybody hasn't seen or read when Winn was before Congress, I highly recommend it. The man was essentially a prophet, and I think if I can roughly quote you here, you basically said we're screwed.
It was not a future tense screwed. The goal of it was saying, here is how I see the future unless we do something. The statement was that the current state of affairs of cybersecurity, such as it was in 1991, that we are essentially defenseless, and it was a Pearl Harbor, electronic Pearl Harbor waiting to happen, and that privacy was essentially going to be totally gone if. And to address your question, Justin, unfortunately, the projections have virtually all come to fruition. And that was a surprise over the years. You know, some of them were pretty obvious, and a lot of people said, you're crazy on this, you're crazy on that. And then that persisted for 10 years, and then stuff has come out. And I think every single technological derivation of information warfare has come true.
Do you think that that's for a lack of trying, or things just have gotten too complex that we just can't effectively steer our own?
I think it's similar to what we're facing today with cognitive defense. It's say what? Cyber, say what? Leadership in 1991, early 90s, leadership in the military had grown up with traditional military backgrounds. And it was very fit to the form, follow the thing, march to orders, get up high, time to go over the trenches kind of thinking. And cyber was, that's a computer, right? So there was and we didn't have a lot. At the time I wrote the book, Information Warfare, which is, by the way, still free on Amazon in Kindle form. I think there were 50 million computers in the world. Maybe it was 100 million. It was minor.
And I would assume like mostly government and academic and
enterprise at that point was still, do we need computers? Mm-hmm. We have a mainframe. We should be good. Then the next big question they came up with, and this was early 90s, mid 90s, should we even connect to the internet?
I remember the closed token ring networks and shit.
Some of the people ask me about the old technologies, and I don't remember how they all worked. It's gone.
Well, there's a reason they're not here anymore, because we found better ways of doing it.
And when it comes to Metawar, some places it's called cognitive, disinformation, there's various terms that are used for Metawar, some of which have been politicized. So I do have a tremendous number of predictions in there, and one of them is the AI Jesus kind of thing. But everything I'm aiming at here is less about the cyber, less about the physical, and more about how bad actors are going to mess with our cognition at the individual level, at the educational level, at the enterprise level, certainly, and then at the national level as a form of screwing with nations' zeitgeists.
So one of the things that I found really interesting, Winn, was this all came out of a single line in another talk.
Oh, yeah. Well, if you're talking about, I was the original genesis of it was, I was thinking about the metaverse and, the headsets, and we're going to do all this, and the doctors and what have you. And it was initially going to be a technical bit on the cyber bits, physical and cyber components of an immersive experience, and what are the privacy and security concerns. That's where it all began. When I started giving demo talks, I gave 11 in a week in Holland, the Netherlands, at various audiences, and that is where they all kicked my ass and said, "Where's the humanity? This is about people."
So and that's where the connection between
where the entire thing shifted. I stopped, did a big, not delete, but a lot of editing, and reformulated it all, realizing that I had really not built a decent model to represent how the Metawar thesis and how cognition and how all of these pieces fit together. And this 1,000 people from the Netherlands really straightened my ass out.
And for those of you that haven't had the chance, I highly recommend getting this book. It's going to basically open your eyes to the fact that, I know the way that we've talked about it up until this point is like, this is something that's coming, but this is already happening and has been happening,
yes, it is. Unfortunately, it has. I get into some of the history, but you got to get into go back to Cold War. Go back to Manchurian Candidate, go back to the concepts of brainwashing. And we are seeing the effects of it in implementation today by the work that was generated by two fundamental countries. During Nazi Germany era, they did an extraordinary job of understanding cognitive control of populations. And then the Soviets. And the Soviets did an amazing job, and they still do. And I got to get involved with them later in the 90s. But I also highly recommend looking into the work of Yuri Bezmenov. And of course, there's a lot of reference to him in the book. And he was a Soviet propagandist for the KGB from the 1960s on until he defected to the United States in 1984 and published a book called My Love Letter to America. And it basically says, you're fucked, and here's why. And it is the same techniques that have been used in our political system now for the last couple decades, using exactly what he describes as how to do it.
That is insane. And if you ask any American citizen, the first thing they're going to tell you is, no, this is a free country. It's a free country, but we're still being swayed. And, once you look at the way that Winn breaks this down, This is not just cyber. This is, it's a complete emulsion. I love how you phrased it in there, and I'm gonna screw it up. The metaverse or the Metawar is the easiest way to completely destroy a society or control it, or how you ever said it. But it's everything that we see. It's everything that we do. It's all the stuff that's being fed to us through the news, social media. We're already on this ride.
Yes, absolutely. We are. We've seen enough of the negatives of it, whether it is at the political level, it's at the enterprise. Enterprises are always under attack because that's where the money is. You see it behind ransomware attacks. You see it behind. I've got you on video doing porn stuff, phishing, and all of these things are various categories of what we call social engineering, but it is so far beyond social engineering, because now we have a really, really strong idea. And this has only been in the last 10 years since neuroscience has really grabbed itself and created itself a firm position in the mindset of researchers, that we understand how this works, and we understand now why it works. And the fundamental reason is that humanity, we as a species, a biological species, we were not created to deal with information or technology. We were created, we were built, we evolved, whichever term you like, to avoid bears, tigers, nasty water, food that tastes bad, spit it out, for our survival. We were never designed to be information machines.
But yet we've made them such an integral part of our lives and society that we can't turn this ship around at this point.
I use the year 1956 as the beginning of the information age, and it's a great bar talk in order to have people argue with me. But the reason I picked 1956 is because of a single photo of a forklift lifting a 5-ton IBM hard drive of 5 megabytes into the storage area of a Pan Am plane.
Oh,
and that is
the good
where
old days.
I use the beginning of the hockey stick, just because we could argue all sorts of things. There's been information overload allegations for centuries, but certainly nothing like we're doing with technology now being the driving force behind it.
No, yeah, I think it's interesting you mentioned that we're not created, or that we haven't evolved to handle the data information that we're dealing with now in everyday lives. And I think it almost seems like you've got biological adaptation, which is a very slow process, and technology is just moving so fast that we can't adapt, or at least in a biological sense, we can't adapt in a way that is efficient to ourselves.
Hi, transhumanism to the rescue.
And then Lynn bridges the gap.
I am the missing link.
This is where, and in the book, I really, I'm looking for something over here. I really hope and try to offer some sincere hope of that there is a way for us to adapt. You have to keep in mind a very fundamental thing. Our brain, all the neurons, all the numbers and all that, it's processing all the time. We have fundamentally two brains, and with the neuro guys, deal with me, you know what I'm doing. I'm simplifying something. And it goes back to the work of psychologist William James at the end of the 19th century. And he called it the conscious and subconscious. Real easy. Okay. Go on and on and on until the work of various thinkers in the 1940s, and then finally the culmination by philosopher Daniel Kahneman. And he calls it System 1 and System 2. System 1 is our unconscious processing, which processes 320 to 400 billion bits per second. So with that 300 to 400 billion bits per second, making everything work, our conscious mind, where we actually think and talk and do cognitive stuff, somewhere between 2 and 4 kilobits. So who's in charge? Who's in charge? Where is our identity? What is our concept of self? How does belief fit into this? And that is all system one. The majority of it is system one. What some researchers had ignored since the early 1960s, there was some brilliant work done, and it was called mental inoculation. And the mental inoculation came out of trying to deprogram people, unbrainwash people, all the stuff from the World War II, things that allegedly happened, Cold War kind of brainwashing techniques that we were aware of. And this guy said, well, here's how you do it. That was ignored for roughly 60 years until these two Dutch researchers said, wait a minute, this is really, really interesting. And then they went to Cambridge University. And what they came up with is rather amazing, so simple. When you're arguing with somebody who has a belief system, debunking, proving them wrong with evidence largely doesn't work. Largely doesn't work for all sorts of reasons. Again, the book gets into, I don't want to waste the time here. The emotional appeals do not typically work for the majority of people that have hard-coded system one, unconscious, hard-coded beliefs. What does work is what Maguire in 1961 first published, and then Sander van Linten and Roenbuch, I cannot pronounce his name, I apologize, guys. John, I'll just call him John, came up with is pre-bunking. And pre-bunking is telling the brain, telling a person, I'm going to lie to you about something. Here's what I'm going to lie to you about. Here is the lie. What do you think? That's very rough overview. What it does is it primes the brain to actually think and pause to go from a system one gut reaction into a system two conscious reaction. After one 7-minute session, roughly a 51% increase in the cognitive ability to make better judgments as to whether something is either accurate, on the money, smells funny, is worth additional investigation. So putting the cyber view on top of that, I said, this is all we're doing. All that's doing is what we were used to. We got one fundamental channel that's detecting everything. We got all of our detection shit. But when the primary detection channel goes, whoa, I really see something, what happens? It does a pause and then goes over to secondary inspection. I got to look at this closer. Or maybe it brings a human involved and I go deeper and deeper. It basically hits a pause button in the reaction cycle of the OODA loop of the process. What they have discovered works, and it parallels 100% what we do in cybersecurity. It also parallels 100% what mRNA does to the physical biological immune system. The traditional way of getting a virus being protected against an external biological pathogen is to build up the immune system, eat dirt. So we let our grandkid eat dirt and get all the stuff in it and get sick while you're young. People don't like getting vaccinations because they're injecting a live version of whether it's polio or any of the stuff. It's a live version of it. That scares the shit out of a lot of people. Rightfully so, not so, that's another discussion. But what mRNA does is merely sends pre-bunking instructions to tell the the biological immune system on how to build its own immunity. That's what van der Linden and Rosenberg, John, came up with and have proven works. There's a way out of this mess. It's not going to be easy.
But that was where I was going to go, and not to give away too much of the book, the processes in order to inoculate ourselves would require some massive behavioral changes on an individual level.
Yes and no. It depends what you have going first. What, in many cases, people say I have to be very careful on my quote. A large group of people in the cybersecurity community. If I say to you, "Hey, Len, I got this new Altoid box, and I can put 300,000 terabytes in it," I'm going to hope you're going to call, "When you're full of shit."
Yeah, because the best we can do right now, I think, is 7 petabytes in an ounce.
See, you're pausing.
You're right. You're
questioning.
Right. You're right. We are skeptics.
Is he full of shit or is he not? Now, I know when he's normally not. Maybe he's trolling me. Maybe he had 2 glasses of wine and he's really having fun with me. But you're going to spend a little bit of time.
You got a point
on it.
You raise a valid point.
That in our world, that's normal. In the world of engineering, in the world of science, that is normal to question even your dearest friend.
Oh, yeah.
The pre-bunking, we have it built into so many of us, and the engineering science types do. Most people, unfortunately, do not. So we will willingly go to pre-bunking classes. We will willingly go to cognitive strengthening classes. We'll willingly go to how do I recognize and defeat the top 17 argumentative fallacies that are used against us. We will do that willingly.
Absolutely.
Do you think that's just because of the adversarial mentality of people in cyber that we're more prone to?
I think I feel, boy.
I want to throw.
We tend to trust very little. We're very cheap. We're very selfish with our trust.
Do you think that it also may have something to do with our age? And as people that grew up before without having things like the internet to begin with, because I actually, one of the things that I was looking at in context with a lot of what you're saying in the book and how, the manipulation through social media and everything, I think like your Gen Xers, your boomers, we are much more skeptical of this stuff than the Gen Zers and the millennials.
There was one study, and I wish I could give you the exact date of it. It's somewhere around here. And it was based upon what is called MIST, the Misinformation Susceptibility Test. And again, this was something that was done out of Cambridge, out of the psychology department with Sander and his crew. And it was doing a gauging of who is more susceptible. And in the most broad, without getting into the details, I got to be very careful here. There were 2 groups of people that were more susceptible to accepting information on face value without questioning it. One was younger folks, the millennials and whatever the one after them is.
The Gen Zs.
They were more likely to believe, and I'll use the technical word from some universities, bullshit, than others. And that's actually there's a book out there called It's Bullshit, and it's actually brilliant the way it's written. The other group are those that have conservative political leanings.
Really?
Yeah. The studies are there, the charts are there, it's all there. So those are the people that are going to be less willing to want to go learn this stuff. And so how do you do that? Well, in an enterprise, you can certainly use a lot of these techniques and a lot of and I'm not going to use the word training because I think that's the wrong word, adaptation, learning to coexist with information and technology and hold your own with it, because we tend to just, if the computer says it, it must be true. Bullshit. That's what most of us would say. We go, maybe it's true. Does it pass all of the sniff tests? We would say.
Yeah.
So should these techniques be taught under security awareness training? Right now, that's probably the easiest entree to enterprise. But again, you have a willing audience by and large. The corporation is the audience. Getting it outside of that audience is going to require an entirely different set of techniques. You're not really
let's be honest, the people that need to be getting this is starting in the elementary schools.
If you take the work that is being done in Finland, they begin at toddler level in the pre-K. And it was fascinating to watch the first time. Was one of the Finnish instructors doing fairy tales with the kids, and how much of this is true and not true? How much is real and not real? And they began it at that level.
That's where it needs to, because
the Scandinavian countries are way ahead of us. Between the UK and the EU, there's roughly 5 billion euros a year funding research projects into this. Heavily, 80% funded by the public sector.
Yeah, it feels like we focus too much on curriculum and what you should believe instead of critical thinking and how to think.
No, our system is memorize the set of facts.
Yep.
Don't learn how to think. What the European efforts are at are certainly education is a piece of it, but it's also the cognitive defensive abilities of the population as a whole. And they are treating it as a national security issue, as we should be, because the United States is cognitively defenseless right now. Sweden, a dear friend of mine, is running the Psychological Defense Agency for Sweden. There's similar efforts going on in all Scandinavian countries, Estonia and the three, Lithuania and Latvia. And there's more efforts now in the continent, but there's also more political opposition on the continent to that.
Just to broadly build like community awareness of this type of.
If you are a promoter of ideas that are false, that cannot be substantiated, that are shouted from the rooftops as fact, but it's really just your opinion, that becomes very political, very contentious, exceedingly quickly. And almost all of the projects in the United States have been shut down since 2022.
So given everything that you learned through your research, I know this is going to probably be one of the more dark questions that I ask, but the one thing that I love about you, Winn, is if you ask the question, you'll answer it.
Maybe.
Given maybe not on camera, but given what you've seen, and like we were just talking about in terms of the generational and the age differences, all of us, we're starting to age out. Where do you see this leaving us as a country in terms of our ability to protect ourselves and be in an actual position to be defensive, 2-3 more, let's go 2 generations beyond where we are now?
This is the utopian versus dystopian.
Well, I think
I hope that the NHI, the multidimensional NHI, finally engages with us, and we can put a lot of these debates to bed.
I guess my point was, we can all see the future and what AI and LLMs and just the technology in general can potentially do for humans. But what good is that if we're not going to be in any type of right mental state to be able to actually, number one, take advantage of it, and number two, not become totally dependent and slaves to it?
Okay. I'll ask you the question, because I'm not going to answer this on camera. Were the roughly 800 people under Jim Jones for their mass suicide, were they the Borg?
That, in my opinion, I've done a lot of. Funny you picked that one, because you could have gone with that one. You could have gone with David Koresh in Waco. I mean, a lot of
the guy that one's in Rancho Santa Fe, Southern California. That was a bunch of 30 of them. That were.
Do you just mean when you ask if they're the Borg? Do you just mean kind of as far as collective groupthink, or
they are a collective groupthink under a single? Well, Borg is a hive mind. In this case, Jim Jones would have been spreading the hive.
Yeah, he would have been the king of the hive. But I get the question you're answering. I think that completely validates my fear. You know, and these are people that didn't have technology. They just had a very charismatic individual. Now, with everything that we've got, hell, we could AI generate a charismatic individual. I mean, we've got AI Jesus now.
We do have AI Jesus.
You know, so, I mean, let's just use that one for just a second. Let's corrupt AI Jesus's data model that says if you're a certain, you know, background or something, you know, you're not worthy. You know, now what does that do? So, I mean, you said Jim Jones, and to me, this has the potential of being Jim Jones and Jonestown on a potentially global scale, and that is absolutely terrifying.
Well, all right, look, China right now has a social scoring system.
I've heard of this. Don't know much about it, but I've heard of it.
What it means is if you cross the light on the red, you lose 10 points. You spit on the street, you lose 20 points. You help an old lady across the street, you earn 5 points. Your entire life is monitored and judged, and your ability to rise through society, get loans, buy things, income, and credit-based is all based upon behavior.
Isn't there a movie about that? No, it's Facebook.
So social construct, social behavior determination for value. In the US, we already have that, and we see it in race relations.
Yeah.
So we've got the American history of already doing that. China is, maybe because they got a 1.7 billion people, that's the best way to manage. Maybe the best way is benevolent dictatorship. For those that remember the cartoon strip, The Wizard of Id.
Yep.
But benevolency is a variable with where is your neutral.
And how you've opened my mind to so many different possibilities, you know, and I love the potential, but you know, coming from my background, my faith in the human animal is really not that high.
We are designed to not to want to disagree with our peers. And I forget the name of the studies, very, very popular study that's referenced, it's in the book, obviously. And when you ask a group of people a question, do you agree with this or don't agree with this? Everybody kind of starts looking around and they fall into the majority so that they're not standing out. They're not being different. We're assholes. We're going to get up on stage and challenge. And when I gave, I think you know Dr. Mark Carney, the math, he says yes. He's my math bitch. Sweetheart, we are dear friends. But the reason I met him is I was giving a talk in Paris, and I start a lot of my talks off. Hi, I'm Winn. My job here is to get you out of your comfort zone and throw as much bullshit your way as I can. Your job is to stand up on your seat and say, bullshit, Winn, but be right about it. And Mark did this to me, and people have done this over the years. We encourage it because we learn something. And getting more people to think like that, to behave like that, and to get their mental immune system further evolved to the point where that they're comfortable with the paradoxes. They're comfortable with the discomfort. They're comfortable with their own internal biases that conflict each other. That puts them into normally cognitively very uncomfortable positions, the majority of people. And that's why pre-bunking and getting that pause button in the OODA loop of process and decision making is, in my opinion, so critical to moving forward on our own steam and not somebody else's steam. Whether it's a human, he who controls the technology controls the narrative.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us tonight. When any opportunity I have to pick at your brain, brother, I will sit at your heel and
no, you're not. No. Let's get together, and it's called a glass of Coteron.
You got it, man.
Anywhere I am, anytime. And
same in return. Same in return, brother. Any last thing? We're going to definitely put the link to your book on Amazon. And one other thing, I'm going to start saying this at the end of every episode, not just for myself, but also for Hutch, and in this case, Winn as well. If you guys are picking up our books, please take the time to go up and give us a review on Amazon. They are extremely important. They keep, the books in the analytics, and it helps us put these messages out and get it further to more people. So with that, take us out.
I do have a final word. You asked, and then you interrupted me. Jeez, Len. I wear this pin when I travel, and it's a NASA pin. And you may have seen it. And
I've seen it.
For the world, and it goes, not flat. We checked. that gets me free drinks, because the flight attendants and pilots love it. I'm having a new pin built as a result of all of this work. And I mean it deadly seriously. Trust nothing, verify twice.
I like it.
That can be your sign off. Trust nothing, verify twice.
All right. Yeah, I think that's an excellent sign off. Excellent thought to leave us with. Well, thank you, Winn, so much. This was amazing. Fantastic conversation.
Good meeting you, Justin. Hopefully again.
Likewise.
Len,
somewhere, someplace. One last time, The Art and Science of the Metawar by Winn Schwartau. Check it out. He's available on paper copy, Kindle, Amazon, probably Barnes & Noble, and anywhere else major books are sold. So give it a read. It's going to change your perception of reality.
And with that, Cybercognition over and out.
Peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Cybercognition Podcast with Hutch and Len, part of the ITSP Magazine Podcast Network. If you like this story, add this show to your favorite podcast player and share the Cybercognition Podcast with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to connect your brand to this show and its audience, visit itspmagazine.com to learn how to sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey.